Welcome everybody. Today's shir is run by the students. So let's start. We're in Siman 64, Samach Daled. And Alan, I think you're starting off.
Yes, welcome everyone, and Aaron and I will be starting off these first two Seifim.
But keep the microphone close to your mouth or something.
No, better?
Yeah. I don't know how you can do that the whole time.
I will do my best. Yes, Aaron and I will be starting off the first two Seifim. Hopefully just getting at the question of what is the experience that Torah Shulchan and the Gelim are trying to create with this particular post-marriage period. So if you'll have up the foundational sources that we sent out, sharing them in the chat now in case folks don't have them. Just going to walk you through a couple of places how we actually got to our story in the Torah Shulchan Aruch. So the first place that we're focusing in on the question of malacha immediately post-marriage, partly because the issues of 3 days versus 7 of bracha and simcha we already saw previously. So in the Tosefta we get this first statement around 3 days of non-work following the wedding, and those 3 days particularly leading into Shabbos. The Gemara, we have a Braita where we get a takana of the Chachamim. It says Shaktu Chachamim al takanat Bnot Yisrael she Sameach ima Shosha Yamim. So and they do this because L'machar mashkim l'manato beholech lo. The concern is that the husband is going to just wake up the next morning, go straight to work, and leave the house. So the Nesek Elim will have different interpretations of why exactly that is, what's going on in the husband's mind. But that is at least the basis for the Isser that we're going to see in the Torah Shulchan Aruch. Aaron, you want to pick up?
Yeah, and so the other, just the other key source before looking at the Torah Shulchan Aruch is the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. We're not going to read these inside, but just at the end, the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, this particular chapter ends with a description of grooms as analogous to kings. So just as a king doesn't go to the shuk alone, so does a chatan not do so, and et cetera, et cetera. The Avia Omer actually notes that there is a girsa debate about whether there's one girsa of the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer that actually explicitly says a king does no work. So to a chatan does no work, but the Avia Omer decides against that particular girsa. He also notes that we're going to see later that there are a couple of commentators who think that malacha is actually not asur, and that there is the possibility of the people who think it is asur ruling based on the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer as an agadic source. He also rules out that possibility ultimately as well. But we just thought it was interesting that this description of a chatan and sort of what ideally we're trying to analogize the chatan to brings us into a question of how are we actually ruling on sources in terms of agada and halacha. So with that in mind, the other just 2 quick sources, we brought the Rambam just because he most succinctly summarizes the different day counts, even though we don't actually hold by the different day counts. But he also uses the frame Eino osek b'malachto, v'lo nosev v'notem b'shuk. He doesn't actually use the word asur, but he does seem to think it is potentially asur. And then just the final source that we'll see coming up in the Ramah is Rabbeinu Yerucham says that these 3 days ומכל מקום, הכנסת 3 ימים, תקנות בנות ישראל היא, ואם היא מוחלת על כך הרשות בידה. That this, because it is a takana, she can waive it. And we're also going to see a debate about what is it exactly that she can waive and who is it that can do the waiving. There are different opinions about this. So with that, let's turn to the Shulchan Aruch. Does someone want to read 64.1? Yavni, you had a question?
Yeah, you said because it's a takana, if she wants to waive it, she can waive it. That's not true of all takanot, right? Or even all
I think,
takanot.
It's a takana specifically for her benefit. Therefore, she might be able to waive it. But again, the question of, right, he is talking specifically, you could read it as he's talking specifically about the takana for an almanah. So you might say an almanah can waive her takana, a betula cannot waive these yimei simcha. The takana is also in the context of simcha. So you might say what she can waive is his particular obligation to supply her with simcha, but the other things that come with those 7 days, including the obligation to do no work, or being forbidden to do work, that might be something she cannot waive. So let's see different interpretations of what it is that can be waived and by whom. So does someone want to read
where are you? Where are you?
in the Shulchan Aruch?
Okay.
64.1. Joel.
Why not? All right. I'll give the title too. Why not? Zman nisui betula over chata ve'almana v'im eno rotze lasot suda uvo shisha seifim. Hanose betula sarich lismoch ima shiva yamim shelo yaseh melacha v'lo yisav yiten bashuk ela ochel v'shotev v'sameach ima bein im hu bachur bein im hu almon. So it's all about who here. That's all the mechaber. Okay, so just right, if a man marries a previously a virgin, presumably a previously unmarried woman, then he needs to be engaged in simcha with her for 7 days, and I think this means what are those ways of or included amongst those, but not necessarily that he shouldn't do malacha, whatever that means. He shouldn't engage in commerce in the shuk. And rather, what he should be spending his time doing is eating and drinking and being happy with her. And it doesn't matter what his previous marital status is. So, okay. And the Rama adds, "V'chatan asur basiyat melacha v'asur latzet yechidi bashuk." And so it's not 100% clear as he clarified the Shulchan Aruch or adding to it, but he says he actually uses the word an isur of melacha as opposed to lo yaseh, right? And he says also he shouldn't go alone in the shuk, which. And all that came from the Ran. So, he says Ran and also of Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. He has both quoted there. So,
Alan, I'll kick it over to you.
Great. I think maybe we should do the second Shulchan Aruch as well, because it is closely linked in, particularly on the issue of the potential Isur Malacha. Anyone want to just take that quick line? Yeah, go for it.
הנושא את הבעולה צריך לסמוך עמה 3 ימים. בן בכור, בן אלמון, ויש אומרים דבכור שנשא בעולה צריך לשמוח עמה 7 ימים. Do you want me to translate, or is that clear enough?
I think we should be good.
Okay. והאישה יכולה למחול על שמחתה. says the Rama.
So Joel already pointed to this ambiguity here in the first Seif around what exactly is going on with Malacha. Is it an Isser, or is it something else entirely, right? I mean, I could say what I think, but anyone have any initial thoughts? How do you read the force of what's being stated either by the Mechaber or the Rama? Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, at least from Aleph, it seems like this is only a partial answer to your question, but it seems like the Rama, from the fact that he says Ve'chatan asur ba'asiyat melacha, like the fact that he feels the need to comment that and kind of repeat what's in a certain sense already been said, suggests to me that the Rama thinks that the Mechaber isn't giving a full isur melacha, right? Because otherwise, why does the Rama say that? He could just have the second part. He could just have vasur, let's say, right? So it seems like, if I didn't have the Rama, I might have read it differently. I might have said, oh yeah, he means you really shouldn't do work, as opposed to like, yeah.
Right, and we saw in the Rambam, we didn't see it because I didn't read it inside, but I said outside, right, that the Rambam's language is similarly ambiguous, where once you've noticed the ambiguity in the Ramah and the Shulchan Aruch, you might read it back into the Rambam, where he says, Eina osek b'melachto.
Rafi, go ahead, and then maybe we'll turn to the Chalka Machokek, who specifically
also, you can say that like the Machloket ben Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah is like a question of, is the Isur Melacha only a fact that goes forth from the Simcha? That's what Mishtameh from the Shana Rambam from the Shulchan Aruch, that like being Sameach is also not doing Melacha. Or do you have an actual Isur Melacha, like what the Rema brings from the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer? It's like being a king is like actively, it's like Shamor and Shabbat, is this proactive not doing nothing. So like the language really matters here. Like that's how I think it.
Right, the Simcha seems to be about something that is the husband is doing for the wife, but if we're looking at Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, there's nothing about the wife there. The being like a king actually seems to be about the husband. Alan, did we want to talk about, maybe I'll just mention the other ambiguity in the Ramah?
Right. So I think let's turn to the Chalka Machokek, who is going to pick up on this. But
can I just ask one question before we go on?
Absolutely.
Does anyone have like Joel and I were puzzling over what actually is going on with a king not going out in the shuk without people there, and why? Like, is it just a kavod thing? Is it some other, like, what's actually behind that? And I'm just interested if you all have hypotheses.
I would propose that it's kavod. Yeah, that sounds like you know. Usually they have an entourage.
Or is it dangerous?
There
that was my other guess. Yeah.
There is a concept that a chatan, especially before he gets married, like the day before he gets married, that he's in a dangerous position.
Right.
Because he's about to do a big mitzvah and the Satan wants to stop him. And so that he should always have a shomer. So that's interesting you say, is it dangerous? But I never heard of having a shomer after the wedding.
No, but it's, well, it depends
Except
how
here.
you want to use it. Depends how you want to use it, right? Who is it? If I remember, the Chalkas L'Chalkek, right? Does he have it on that? No, it's not Chalkas L'Chalkek. Who would it be?
The Pirkei Tshuva discusses some.
Who talks? Not the Bear Hatev. Is it the notion that that since there's the Bear Hatev. Izen Israel v'minhag shelo yotzei chasan v'beit knesset kol shiva yamim ki ein benimsa shelivuhu also mibeso. Who's going to get up for that early run with the chasan? But basically, that's when we base lebeso. Lebeso, this is the Prisha. Yeah, I saw in the Prisha on the tour. But I was trying to do different chilukim many years ago, and I learned it with my great. Like, you give the guy a week to sleep in, which is part of the din of simcha, the sameach. So, anyways, I'm quoting my grandfather on that. I also want to quote the Rav would always say, osek and sasek really also refers to refers to a state of mind. So you don't want them to have a state of mind about business, because then you're osek. Osek always means that your whole consciousness is always there somewhere about making that. I did a chassan kala at the Sephardic Temple in LA, gorgeous synagogue, and the chassan, who was a very big deal maker in Hollywood, was walking down, finishing a deal until we took away from him his well, in those days it was a BlackBerry. Took away from him his BlackBerry. Anyway, so I make those 2 points, and I want to go back to what Reb Nachum says. Yeah, we're afraid. We're afraid of the Satan. Who's the Satan here? He's the Satan. You hold on to him. I think you hold on to him. Make sure he doesn't disappear. You know. Also, some chassanim have a tendency to disappear not because they want to escape getting married. They just get very confused. So that anyway. So which brings me to the question: is this halachic or agadic? It's a question that you guys brought up. I didn't bring it up. Because you brought it up before, Pikei Rebbe Elazar. Is it halachic or is it agadic?
Right. So when the question of is it halachic or agadic is comes up for those people who think there is not an Isser Malacha, insofar as if we're worried that the guy is going to go to work the next day and there has to be a takana to stop him, that suggests that in some way it's actually not really asur to go to work the next day. If it was the case that the Gemara thinks it's not asur, then it would mean that the only basis upon which people are saying it is asur is Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, which would in that case be ruling based on the Agada against the Bavli, or against the Halacha. The Yavia Omer ultimately says that even the people who think it is asur and appear to think it's not from the Bavli actually do think it is from the Bavli, and there's no one who holds with Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer against the Bavli. But it is an interesting side conversation he gets into.
Why do you think Pirkei Eliezer is more chamur? Is saying it's asur.
Well, this also gets into the question of the girsa difference, where there is a girsa Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer that some people seem to have, where it says explicitly Eino Oseh Malacha. But if you took the Bavli and Ketubot, Lamachar Mashkim L'Umato V'Holechlo, as saying it's not actually asur, as opposed to saying he shouldn't do that and therefore it is asur, then you would have no way of deriving the halacha except from Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. But he makes the argument.
Eino Oseh could also be an observation of the minha of what happens and not a normative statement.
Right, and that is if you have a chance to look, the Meir is the basic view that there's nothing inherently wrong going on here. And
also the Bavli doesn't.
As I'm saying that the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, I don't think it's saying an Isser either.
And also the Bavli isn't not saying any so because the Bavli is speaking about an almanah that doesn't actually have Yemei Simcha. So okay, the Bavli is speaking about a very specific situation. We don't have any knowledge from the Bavli that we had such a chashash on someone that does actually have Shiva Yemei Simcha.
So this will come up in terms of the Ramaz paraphrasing of the Bavli / Rabbeinu Yerucham / Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer about who exactly might there be leniency and when. For those who say that there is something that's not asur about malacha, or is potentially, in what context would that be?
Yeah, so maybe we should get that. Maybe we should get that onto the table just so that people to add one more ingredient to the conversation. Yeah.
I wanted to clarify though, right? An almana does have Yemei Simcha. She only has one day of bracha, maybe, or maybe even none. But she has Yemei Simcha. She has 3, right? So I think you have to say, I mean, the Bavli, there seems to think that it would be, at least there's a hava amina of it, that it would be okay. Had we not made her get married on Thursday, right, there'd be that the guy would get up and go to work, and therefore it sounds like it's not asur potentially, but
Right. So that we're gonna see is, I don't know that we'll have time to read the Meiri, but that's similar to what the Meiri says. But I think maybe we should look at the Chalkat Mechokek and then the Pitrei Tshuva, because they're both going to play out.
And I have a request, which is that talk out at some point the efficacy or the use of having a Gaelic source. So we never talk this way. So here we got an opportunity. We should, how does it impact? What you have done so far is to say there's a Gaelic direction and there's a halachic direction. But I'd like to hear more about this Gaelic thing, especially since I always have people come up to me and say, well, you're a halachic Jew, I'm an Gaelic Jew. I have no idea what that means. But people say, I'm like, so like, how does that work? This Gaelic stuff. That's the request at some point when it comes to your brains, explain it to me. How does the Gaelic work here and why? Okay, I'm done.
Right.
You guys are up.
It does seem. Yes, it seems here that the at least the way that the VM is understanding it, that the only place where Agata is really able to play a substantive role is when halacha and silent is silent, and this basic principle goes back all the way to the Haga. But this is going. We accorded a voice, but only a secondary one. Okay, Chalka Mechokek. There's some interesting stuff in here. Yeah. Any volunteers?
On bet. The Dibur Matchil is V'chatan Asur B'asiyat Malacha. Also, we made a decision not to really focus on the 3-7 distinction, just insofar as we talked about it already in this class a few weeks ago.
And yeah, you go for it.
חתן אסור בעשיית מלאכה, נראה דהגיע הרב דין זה, אף על פי שכבר כתב זה שלא יעשה מלאכה, משום דמלשון הרב המחבר, משמע דמשום לתא דידה תקנו כן, ואם היא רוצה למחול על תקנתה הרשות בידה. וכמו שכתב בסמוך בשם רבני ירוחם, וכדאמרינן בעלמא, כל האומר אי אף שהיא בתקנת חכמים, שומעים לו, על כן כתב דאף יכולה למחול על שמחתה, דהיינו לאכול... thank you. למחול על שמחתה, דהיינו לאכול ולשתות ולשמוח עמה, אבל במלאכה ולצאת יחידי לשוק, אף שהיא מוכלת מכל מקום, הוא אסור בזה, ומטעם שהוא דומה למלך. וכך היה נראה ליישב כוונת הרב בהגה זו, אבל אין זה מוכרח. So like Sarah was saying, it's notable that the Rama seems to be just repeating the Mechaber, and so the Chalkat Mechokek is suggesting one way of explaining it is that it would seem from the language of the Mechaber that for all of it, for all of these rules, the woman can waive it. And the Rama wants to be clear that for the issue of the Melacha, she can't. For the other issues of the Simcha, getting to eat and drink with him, she can waive it, but for his own not going to the shuk alone and so on, that's a separate issue based on him being like a king from the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Did I get it right?
Yeah, and the phrase mishum lata dida is a phrase that shows up elsewhere, and the Gemara which ultimately comes to mean in this context for her benefit.
Thanks.
I see in the
Yeah.
in the second Ramah a support for the Chelkat Machokek. In other words, in Sif Bet, the Ramah writes, "V'ha'isha yechola lemchol al simchata." In other words, dafka al simchata, but not al the Isser Malacha and the B'shuk Yichidi.
So I think we'll see someone who notes that in the Pitchei Tshuva. On the other hand, the issue with that comment of the Ramah, or the complication it engenders, is that it's brought up in the context of a woman who has already been married. So you might say, when he says ha'isha yochola limchol al simchata, what he means is ha'be'ula or ha'almana or ha'gerusha yochola limchol al simchata, and simchata there might mean everything, and a betula eno yochola limchol al klum, which we'll also see as an opinion in the Pitchei Tshuva.
Right, and the other question, just to keep in mind going forward, is as we framed it, what sort of experience is going to great for the married couple if ultimately work is the ban on work is the only thing that we can't get rid of, but everything else is a nice little addition.
I mean, this is relevant if a couple wants to, for example, have a honeymoon later, and and go to work right away. Well, maybe they can, but it's a question that people might ask.
Yes, my friend asked me as I was prepping this material, is this where honeymoons come from? That's probably not. Find a historian to figure that out. Okay. Going to the Pitchei Tshuva, and maybe we should skip the Gimel just for the sake of time. Okay. So we are at Gimel Ba'asiyat Malacha. People see it?
Yeah, do you have a question?
Yeah, about what you were saying, Aaron, is part of the question, and maybe this will come up, whether that Ramah at the end of Seif Bet can refer to both Aleph and Bet, or if it has to refer to. Okay.
We're going to see that in this comment.
Okay, where are we now?
We're on Pitchei Tshuva Gimel.
Okay.
There it is. Now.
Pitchei Tshuva Gimel.
Yeah.
The Dibur Matril is Ba'asiyat Malacha.
There it is in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Does someone want to read? Raphael?
בעשיית מלאכה. ועין בהיטב ועיין בהיחק המחוקק, שכתב דמה שכתב בסעיף ב' דמועיל מחילה, היינו לעניין לאכול ולשתות ולשמוח עמה, אבל לא לעניין מלאכה. דהו אסור מצד עצמו שדומה למלך. ואין בספר המקנה, בית ק"א, בקונטרס אחרון, שכתב דמונח מן הסוגיה, דלא מקרי חתן לעניין זה, שיהיה אסור במלאכה מצד עצמו, אלא כשנושא בתולה. ולפי זה ממילא התשאפר דברי הרימה, דעדי כתב דמאירי בבתולה, שאסור במלאכה מצד עצמו, וצמהנה מחילה. אבל בסעיף ב' נושא בעולה, שפר כתב דמהנה מחילה, משום דלא מקרי חתן לעניין איסור מלאכה מצד עצמו. ועוד כתב, ומי הוא באלמון שנשא בתולה, יש להסתפק עם האיסור מצד עצמו, בש"ס משמע דאסור מצד עצמו ואין שם.
Who is the Pitchei Tshuva? They ask you guys. Who and when? Who is he?
We wrote this down.
Okay. Better than me. I relied on my who.
Okay, the Sefer Makane. We didn't write that one. Sefer Makane. Sorry, we read.
That is the jealous guy. I'm not the one who acquires. Big difference. When you think about it.
Thank you, Sarah, for putting it in the chat. It appears to be Avram Tzvi Hirsch Eisenstadt. Mitzhat. So
When?
he's 19th century Königsberg.
What, and does it say does it say anything about his rabbis? So it's worthwhile for a moment. Look him up in some dictionary there, some encyclopedia. Anybody got it? Find out who this man was. I'm not holding up. I forgot who he is. So that's
He says,
Rabbi
"Hu asak b'Torah b'Beit Midrasho shel Rabbi Yechiel Nachas im Harav Shmuel Halevi v'chaber Sefer Bigdei Yesha Harav Gershon Chentov Baal Mincha Chadasha."
So I want to say this is real Achronim, like mostly kind of pre-Briska, although Briska's in development, and therefore his repetition of the word, what's in a me'atzma? What's his experience? The Easter is mitzad atzma. So in other words, it's not a formulated Easter, so to speak, but the Easter arises out of his identity. I just made it, for those who missed what I just said, I just made this relevant. It's identity, no, but it's lumdus. It's identity halacha. Who he is, it's a din. This is what a chassan is. If you say a chassan is going to do these other things, then it's pogea him being a chassan. It's not formulated. It's not formulated in do or don't do, as well. He has it, but he excuse me. Excuse me. He reformulates it. I'm just repeating myself, so that it has to be in terms of who he is. This becomes, or what it is, this notion of identity halacha, or I should say, identity lumdus, is to my thinking, I didn't see it anywhere, to my thinking, is really part of what the Achronim started to do in many cases, and it's not as legislative as much as it is inherent in the thing itself. So usually it's philosophic, they're bumping into Kant or whatever the guy, they're bumping into idealists, who knows, maybe not, but it's very much idealistic. And by the way, Agada helps a lot for this kind of thinking. Plus is a chassan. What's a chassan? So it's a chassan, a king. So from the din of king, it has nothing to do with real halacha, but it formulates halacha, this identity kind of stuff. Or what's simcha? And then it goes into this thing. And then the Agada works very well. And of course, at some point, it veers to halacha, but it veers to, because it is a halacha book, and what we're supposed to do. But in terms of its origin, I would say it's this agadic, philosophic in the larger sense, kind of dealing. That's my Havana. And that's why, by the way, he repeats it several times. Mitzad atzmo. He's telling us something. It's mitzad, not mitzad a din. It's mitzad atzmo, and then of course becomes the din. All right.
Thanks for that, and just right, and specifically in terms of mitzad atzmo, that right, this is for a chatan who's marrying a betula. But for a chatan who's marrying a betula, mitzad atzmo, actually, it seems like there is no iser malacha. So in that way, he, as Alan noted when we were saying, right, he's not a real or full chatan in that sense. Right, you might be indistinguishable from a normal chatan or a chatan marrying a betula, insofar as unless she waives the iser malacha, he's still going to be doing all the same things. But it is not as strict. And so we talked about the second Ramah. He seems to be reading the second Ramah as applying specifically to a woman who's already been married, and that she can waive the Isser Malacha, in which case Kal V'chomer, she seems like she could waive all the other things, in which case a Betula perhaps cannot waive anything. Joe.
Yeah,
And
just
Joe, go ahead.
in the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, which I'm not looking at the moment, so maybe you guys know this. Is there a chiluk made between a chatanu meriza beula versus a chatanu meriza? Okay, so this
No,
is
it doesn't get to that level of specificity at all. The last point I wanted to bring, just following up on a couple of our conversations from the last 2 weeks, is this idea that the categories of halacha being constructed here, upon whom the Isser Mitzvah Tzma falls, in Amon versus the Bechor, that those aren't necessarily going to correspond with the subjective experiences of each individual groom in each particular moment. I brought this beautiful book, Gilead, by Marilyn Robinson, an older man, a pastor, falls in love with a married woman, and he talks about how that experience is actually a source of more joy and more intensity than his first marriage, which was arranged from birth. That being said, halacha is ultimately for the Rav, right? Like there need to be some sort of general principle. So I just thought that was an interesting voice to bring to the discussion. Yeah. Any other thoughts, either just on the chiluk here, or if this general question of what sort of experience of the post-wedding period the Torah, Shulchan Aruch, Nosei Kelim are trying to construct. Okay, so I think with that, I will thank you all for assertive discussion and learning, and turn it back over to Rav Nachman. Unless Aaron, you have anything else?
No, it's very interesting. But the Mechila is very interesting. Who can do the Mechila? On to Siv Kimmel.
Mechila. So you have a sense that Mechila is something she owns, right? It's her personal possession. Malcha and Mechila. What do you think about that?
Well, this Pischei Tshuva is interesting. That maybe she can't be moichelet. It's not if she's a betula. Which is interesting. In other words, he has a din because he married a betula. It doesn't matter what she says.
Right. Right.
That's he has a din of this. That's an interesting idea. I'm not sure it's right, really. I think that the simple reading of the Ber Heitev is preferable, but it's interesting.
Right, it's something powerful from a marital, even a labor perspective. You know, that doesn't matter whatever work someone may have to get up to do in the morning. You know what? No, we're not going to give a heter in that, which should also raise some interesting questions around post-wedding work leave. Sarah, did you have something there?
Yeah, I was reflecting back on something that on like a back and forth, I think, between or something Rolene said like in like the first or second week about how the initial, in some ways, part of what's going on in Even HaEzer is like trying to get men to be interested in marriage in the first place in some way, and that this is actually part of what this debate about her being able, like the possibility of her mechila or not, is actually about like, do we trust them to make their own judgments about kind of what's good for them in that scenario, or do we actually think they need to be kind of cajoled and coaxed into it through all of the trappings of like the post-wedding period?
Who's
so
they? Who are you referring to? The men or the women?
Both.
Oh, you're saying the couple.
The couple, yeah.
Do we allow them to
right, like,
to avoid this whole thing, or are we instituting it? Are we instituting it upon them? You said.
Dafka because they may not want it, right? Or because they may want to go off to their, like, he may want to go off to his job because that's what he knows, right? Like, and this is this
Right.
like potentially kind of foreign experience, like foreign, stressful, complicated, whatever, like all of those things in a society where, you know, there's a lot less, whatever.
It's kind of like
the lead ups to marriages might look very different than they.
it's like a
than they are.
velut. You have to go through a process of lahavdil. You have to go through a process of mourning, and it takes 7 days. You can't cut it short. And maybe the same thing with the wedding. You have to go through the full realization that you're married now, and that you shouldn't be in some kind of denial. And if you just say, plenty of people just say they want to have, like Rav Landis was saying, only have like 3 Sheva brachas. That you could do. But to avoid the simcha, to go to work, is almost like you're not taking seriously the importance of this new moment.
Yeah, or you're not even like going through the whole, like, right, this is like marking some kind of transformation or transition in your life, and you're not doing it all the way. And it can be easy to resist that because like what's familiar has a certain draw to it. So I don't know, I think like what's at issue, I think, on kind of how you come down on some of this is about how much you think that the whole setup of the simcha and the, you know, the parties and all of it is about making people feel like interested and excited in the project of marriage.
Right. I think that also gets at this comment by the Pichei Tshuva of, right, the question of, is it mitzad atzmo or is it something she can waive? If it's mitzad atzmo, it's about his experience or their joint experience of marriage, of that, right? There's something the halacha thinks the man and presumably also the kala need to experience for the 7 days. But if it's something that can be waived, then it's like sort of like a shalom, more of like a shalom bayit, getting started off on the right foot. But if she doesn't care, she doesn't care. And I also imagine, right, there are people who, it's not just that they want to go to work, but they're, right, if you say, I'm taking 7 days off from my work, they might say, I might all go out of business. There's some other, in the first 2 comments of Pichei Tshuva, there's some other interesting like questions about how seriously the Isser on malacha should be taken, and also what sort of malacha can you do in the year following marriage. I don't know if Alan and I are still calling on people, but
I'll call myself. No, sorry, I wanted to, because I think what you said, maybe this was mashma for you, but I just want to play it out, is that, and then if she is a beula, then she's been married before, and the expectation is she doesn't need to be forced into, you know, like that the chatan and kala have to have 3 days of simcha. She knows if she needs it or not, right? Then she has experience, as opposed to that you have to experience this new thing that you don't really know if you should be mochelet your the experience or not.
Something you said, Aaron, made me think, what you said about you go out of business. I wonder if it's about like pushing the couple in a certain direction, like saying so, or if it could also be something about creating a force within the society to create this space. Like if like, you know, whoever is employing the person or whoever the customers are, he says he wants to go on vacation because he just got married, they can say yes or no. But if it's written in the law that he gets that, it's different.
Interesting. But I just want to clarify. It's a very interesting point. But I want to clarify one thing. I think that it comes out according to any read, really. You know, as according to the Be'er Heitev and according to the Sefer HaMakneh, it still comes out that a betula who gets married can be mochel only on her simcha, but not on the isser of going to work. I didn't see anybody who said that she could be mochel on that. In other words, he still has to. Question is whether that is exclusively for a virgin or also for a beula.
Yeah, but
everybody agrees that by a betula, he has an isser of malacha for 7 days.
But that's only how they medaya Conchita Tarema. They wouldn't
But I'm
say
saying according to the Be'er Heitev and the Sefer HaMakneh. Both sides of this Pichei Tshuva is what I'm saying.
No, but they both they're both reading into what the Rema says against the Shulchan Aruch, meaning that there is a reading on the Shulchan Aruch Shita is that she can actually be mochel.
only in the Ramah, but I'm saying I am pushing that the Ramah, he only says, Ha'isha yechola limchol ala simcha. He doesn't say anything about, in other words, I like the diuk of, you're saying, I could read simcha as everything that's noveya, everything that is noveya from simcha, which is also not working, and all those things. You could read it like that. But that's, I'm just saying that both sides of the Pitchei Tshuva don't say that. And I agree with that. I think that the Yisr Malacha sounds to me like from the Ramah, he's not giving you ability to be mechila, unless I'll ask Alan or Aaron if you saw someone who says no, you could for sure be mechila on that.
It seems like the halacha goes according to the Ramah here, but as I heard Raphael's point
Wait,
was
the Ramah
that
here in which way? No, what interpretation of the Ramah?
in the way that the Ber Heitev interprets it, is I believe what the halacha ends up being. But what I heard, Raphael, what I heard you saying was, if you were just reading the Shulchan Aruch, you would say that there is an option where, according to the Shulchan Aruch, may say, I mean, he may not have this mechila system to begin with, but it seems like he would, assuming he knows Rabbeinu Yerucham, which he probably does, he might just say, yeah, a kala can be, whoever she is, can be mochal on anything, whatever it is, and the most liberal position.
But he never mentions mechila.
He doesn't, but he also doesn't mention, if you're reading the Shulchan Aruch according to the Ramah, he doesn't mention Isser. So you could say he thinks, you can do whatever you want. This is what you should do, but...
You don't even need, no, you could say according to Shulchan Aruch, you don't even need her mechila. It's just advice not to go do malacha. He just says, lo yase, you shouldn't. You shouldn't do malacha, and you don't need her mechila. If you want to go do malacha, then you could. That would be the most...
But then you're a lousy person.
Yeah,
You're like awful. There's a lot of wiggle room. There's a lot of wiggle room here. I want to add a sociological point. I went to a lot of chasanas as a kid, and then high school, family, whatever, yeshivas and all that. One major change that I've noticed is that I'm 71. In my youth, the chassan and the kala were very, they need to be dragged out onto the dancing floor. They needed to be, as we say, create an environment needed to be created in which they could be happy and get out of themselves. And that was like a whole deal. Today, chassans and kalas race to the center. You can do what you want with the sociology, but they race to the center, and they're very active. Not saying good, bad. I mean, that's the way it is. But the notion of creating an environment, which that's why I'm translating Sarah's words, creating the environment, the community creating the environment becomes very important, and we're able to do that. We're able to function. So sometimes the chassan kala play that they're shy, but then we get them out there dancing. That was in the old days. Today they get us out there dancing, right? The chassan points to someone to dance with. I never saw that before. The kala points. Kalas never point, but now they point because everyone's out there being happy, and all of a sudden, the mothers-in-law are taking classes beforehand to learn how to dance. I mean, it's great. It's fine. It's not the worst thing. Okay, I'm done with my rant.
I want to rant one thing.
Yeah.
I want to repeat one thing that I said. I just want to say a lot of times, like Rabbanim, they tell the Chatan and the Kala, you don't need to do, you don't need, like Rabbi Landison, you don't need to do 7 days of Sheva Brachas. If one day, or 3 days, you want to not do a Sheva Brachas, b'vakasha. But you have to add a footnote to that, which is, but the Yisr Malacha is still, is still there. Don't think that just because you're not doing a Sheva Brachas, it's a regular day. You still have, you can go to the Brooklyn Botanical Garden and walk around and look at the flowers together. But don't, yeah.
Well, by the 5th day, you no longer have to eat pizza or whatever. give that up.
All right, let's take a break because it's close to an hour, and we'll come back to Raphael doing Gimel. Okay. So thank you, Raphael. Your Sif Gimel.
So I sent the source sheet. I sent also in the email here in the chat with some additions. It's gonna be a bit less mesudar and orderly as than Aaron and Alan's great cheer they gave. So first of all, I apologize. I want just to ponder like as a klali question, as a general question on how we present halacha, and that's how like I tend to see the difference between our Siman in Shulchan Aruch, Siman Samech Daled, and the Siman that has a lot to do with it in your idea that I pointed to in the source sheet. Your idea Siman Kufain Tet, if I'm right. Just a second. It's Siman. Sorry. Siman Kufain Tet. Yeah, Siman Kufain Tet. It's a very big question of presentation. Because when we go back to the Gemara, and we will do a bit of it today, we see that a lot of the questions that are raised in the poskim are different from the questions that the Gemara deals with very extensively. And as Joel began the reading of the Siman, the koteret of our Siman, is Zman Nesiat, Zman Nisui, meaning when we open the Mishnah in Ketubot is Betulani said Leyom Arvi, Valmona Leyom Chamishi. Till now, till Siman Gimel, we're not speaking about the day. We're speaking about more general criteria, as Aaron and Alan opened, like on Yemei Simcha and on the ability of Mechila and how we build the Yemei Simcha and the Yemei Mishteh, how we build them around the necessities of the Kala and the necessities of Chatan. And again, we're not actually dealing with the day a lot now, because it seems quite fitting, because like when we read the Shulchan Aruch as it is now, as it presents itself now, the questions of how and when doing a wedding are more, let's say, logical. But when we go back to the let's say more maybe more folk sources, we'll try to say maybe today, we have very different reasons. So let's begin from the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch Sif Gimel, who can read? Joel?
Well, since no one else is volunteering, but
Oh,
no, it's okay. Hold on, I'm Samach Dal. Okay, yes, Shomrim. You want us in Evan Ezer, not to read the. Okay, good. Yes, Shomrim. She'ein nosi nashim lo be'erev Shabbat v'lo be'echad beShabbat. Gezerah shema yavo lidei chilul Shabbat betikun hasuda. Okay, so right, we don't do nisuin are essentially surrounding Shabbat. Because there's a fear that you're going to be preparing the Suda either before the wedding on Shabbat, or after, I assume continuing the preparation through from Erev Shabbat into Shabbat, and therefore you'll be cooking on Shabbat or any other sort of malacha. V'yesh matirin, but others are lenient. V'chein pashat minhag lisan nashim be'erev Shabbat. All right. V'hu sheyitrach besudat hanisuin shlosha yamim kodem hanisuin. All right.
So let's just stop here just a second. Yeah, so like this is the first Siman that we're actually speaking. This is the first time in the whole Siman we're actually speaking about the day.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, when we're speaking about the day, we're speaking about days we shouldn't marry on them for a very specific reason, for the reason of Chilul Shabbat. That's like, it's also a very logical / halachical reason, and this will be useful in the next parts. But like, we're speaking about the issue of Chilul Shabbat, and it's very interesting also on how the Shulchan Aruch frames it, because the Shulchan Aruch says Yesh Omrim. This Yesh Omrim, it's called the Bavli Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud actually says it's a Gzerah. It's a Gzerat Chachamim. It's not like, it's very interesting on how the Shulchan Aruch chooses to put it, but it's not muvan me'elav bichlal that you can actually have the option of la'atir l'set be'erev Shabbat. The only matir they are, it's actually the Rosh, and the Rosh doesn't actually have a nimuk. He simply says, lo chayshinan. We're not afraid anymore that they will do the Chilul Shabbat. The Chilul Shabbat that the Gemara states is the Shemesh Chad Benof, that he will actually slaughter something to eat during the Seudah. It seems so different from our world today that people don't actually do Shechita, but Shechita, especially of Ofot, is something very simple, probably, or viewed as simple at those times. But like, this is a side note that like we simply have almost a minago kiralacha here. That like people actually got married on Fridays. That was the situation for various economic and social reasons. They are doing a Sudate Sheva Brachot, joining it to Shabbat. It's much easier. But like it's simply a minago kiralacha. Like it's an important thing to say that like we don't actually have a reason to say differently. Ravandis?
Yeah, no, I find this interesting. So I'm listen, in Yerushalayim, all my great-grandfather's children were married on Friday. It was the Rav of the city. And he didn't, because of Minhag, they didn't have the money. So the first Suda was Friday night. I mean, they just didn't have the money. So I'm just kind of think about this. The word Minhag becomes very, very strong. They didn't do it for the Minhag. They did it because they didn't have the money. So I'm offering that to you.
No, yeah, that's also like, Minhag here is more of a, like Minhag, what people did.
Good. Okay.
That's the interesting point. It's not a minhag with an halachic toikef or something like that.
Yeah.
Even though that we can actually go against Dina de Talmuda. The Talmud uses a language, a very interesting language, gzeira shemesh chad benov. Like the Talmud, especially in most girsot, the Talmud says gzeira, meaning the Talmud actually imagines a beidin somewhere in history, I don't know, actually saying Lo laset be'erev Shabbat, and we come against this beidin with no actual beidin gadol mechavero. It's a very interesting situation. But again, in the general framing and going back to like the bigger picture, this is like the first days we're actually speaking about. And if we open the just a second, and if we open I think it's the Bet Shmuel. No, it's not the Bet Shmuel. Pardon, just a second. The Pitrei Tshuva. Joe, would you mind to read it, or does anyone else volunteer? Yeah, Alan, please. וכן פשט המנהג.
וכן פשט המנהג להצטרף שבת, אבל בחודש שבת אין מנהג. וכן מצאתי בשלמה שכתבת אין מדרך לעשות על מסוימים ביום אחד כסוכות הקודמים.
So Chukot Akutim here is not actually Chukot Akutim. It's a euphemism for Christians. Christians get married on Sunday because they have mass. So the Chalkei HaMechokek here enters with the Rema, with the Shut Rema. We do have this very strong opinion of the Rosh that simply matirs the Isur of Laset Samuch LeShabbat, as Joel said. It's a Isur to it's not an Isur to be get married before Shabbat or after Shabbat. It's like they're not separate Isurim. They all have something to do with this this Chashash of Chilul Shabbat. And the Svara of the Rosh basically like Oker cancels it all, yeah. But the Chalkei HaMechokek actually like he's explaining what are the inner thoughts here. Of course, we can say more simply, why wasn't the minhag to get married on Sunday, as exactly like Rabbi Landi said in the Diek? It's not a minhag, or it's not a problem to get married Sunday. Even before masses, people wouldn't want to get married on Sunday if they can get married on Friday. If you actually can like oikera dina de Talmuda for the benefit of having a good wedding, let's do it together in Shabbat as the best possible way. Also, like a side note here, an interesting side note here is that the question that it's actually always being asked is the question of the chashash chilul Shabbat. Is the chashash real anymore, or isn't it? But we actually have a much more simple chashash that like is omitted in a very serious way. Is the question of bila rishona b'Shabbat. They're like, it's important to most of the Rishonim to not state this chashash because Allah has been paskin this issue. It's not an issue. Any questions?
Yeah, sorry, where is the Gemara where it says
On the Gzeira, it's just a second. I brought it in the Daf Mekorot.
Your last source.
Yeah, my last source. One of there are two over there.
Ktubot Daled Amud Bet.
Yeah, Ktubot Daled Amud Bet, but there's also like it begins from Ktubot Bet Amud Aleph already. V'tinase be'echad b'Shabbat. Yeah, we have a different shakdu here, but like actually the Gzeira comes on Daf Daled Amud Bet. Yeah.
Wait, when you say it's a din of the Gemara, it's not a din of Rabbi Zera?
Yeah, but like there's no one in the Talmud saying differently. And
right.
The
Rishon can say that's a dat yachi.
No, but the interesting situation is that when we read the Rosh in the Tur, it doesn't seem that he doesn't think Rabbi Zera is the halacha. What seems it's like he says there's no chashash anymore. The chashash doesn't exist. It's a factual question, and it's an interesting thing to say. I can agree with you that like he could like stir around it in a different way, but like also Rabbi Zera here in the Gemara isn't his opinion. He's mefarish on a braita. Ben kach uben kach lo yisa be'erev Shabbat v'lo b'rishon Shabbat. It's an actual din of the Talmud. I couldn't. If I would go in your direction, I could say that like we can adopt a different parshanut to this baraita, saying that I can marry every day if I want, if I have a toreach, and that's what the Shulchan Aruch says right afterwards. That he's saying im tarach gimel yamin ubelvad sheitarach gimel yamin. Again, going back to the bigger picture here, we didn't speak about it yet, and the Shulchan Aruch brings it in a very interesting way. But like one of the basic dinim on how we build a Jewish wedding is this din of tircha. That the chatan should labor at least 3 days. It sounds so funny today that people plan weddings for months and months and ahead, but chatan should labor at least 3 days.
He's laboring for the Suda. I mean, we could use a priest right now. Goyim get married on Sunday. It's a sacrament. It's a holy day. They leave the church without having a schnapps or a kichel, nothing, not a herring. And Jews, the whole thing is about tircha. The whole thing is about making sure there's a Suda. And the Chil Shabbos element, of course, is scary because we've all cooked before Shabbos. So this is a very interesting. It's great. It's great. And all those movies you've seen about church weddings, you've never seen them eat anything because they don't eat.
Yeah,
they call that a wedding.
The question here of the how we want or not, or we don't want to be like the Goyim and the remote that the Pitcha Tshuva brings, it's very interesting here as well. But I want to continue to I think the more, let's say, spicy issues that like this that the Siman brings, because again, as I said in the beginning, it's a question of framing, because like there are many questions that when we look at it, look at if we would learn halacha only by the Shulchan Aruch, or like the Rambam wanted, only to learn him, we would miss a lot of like layers of halacha and minhag. They're like hidden below. So can I? Who wants to continue in the Shulchan Aruch? Alan? Shukr.
Sorry, lost you for a second there. Where
We are in Siman Gimel. Seif Gimel. In the middle. It's מקום שאין בית דין.
מקום שאין בית דין יושבים אלא בשני וחמישי בלבד, בתולה נישאת ביום רביעי. שאם הייתה לו טענת בתולים, ישכים לבית דין. מן החכמים שנעשה את הבעולה ישנה בחמישי, כדי שיהיה שמח עמה 3 ימים. חמישי בשבת, ושבת בשבת, יוצא למחר יום ראשון. אגב, ונהגו שלא לישא נשים, אלא בתחילת החודש, ועוד שלא לבנה במלואה. הר"ן, פרק 40, ציין ביורדיה, סימן קע"ט.
Yeah. So, like, the interesting, again, it's very interesting because, again, the first din that the Gemara brings of Lased Betula Berevi V'Chamishi, and the koteret of the Siman, as Joel stated in the beginning, is brought last. We speak about very general things in the first, and about very technical things in first, and then we reach this din of Zman, and the Shulchan Aruch, and the way he frames it, again, it's back to framing here. He frames it only as a question of Batei Din, meaning the relevancy of the din of the Mishnah, it's even the din of the Mishnah on how we ought to get married and what day we ought to get married. It's only about the question of Beit Din, and it's actually what the Mishnah says. Makom she'en she'im haya lo tanat betulim yashkim, and it's how society was arranged, and like the Shulchan Aruch has this understanding that, like, in the world post Takanat Ezra, Takanat Ezra was that you should have Beit Din at least twice a week, Sheni v'Chamishi. But in the world, we actually have a Beit Din in every town every day. So all this Takana of Yamim loses all of its sense. Again, it goes back to something very logical. You have to have a Beit Din for Tanat Betulin. And the interesting thing is that, like, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't seem to think that you actually have any chovah towards an almanah on the day you should marry her. It's only minhag, even. Like the chamishi of almanah, it's actually even looser than the revi of betula. If the revi of betula, you actually have a situation, a historical situation that you might need to have it because you don't have a Beit Din. The chamishi of almanah, it's only a minhag chachamim. It's like very, very loose. Joel, you had a question?
Well, if I remember in the first parak of Ketubot, there is like another kind of layer in Chazal that kind of gets into that there's superstition about the days, right?
I'm getting there.
And you are getting there. Sorry,
that's exactly where I'm getting there.
Yeah.
No, again, that's why I said it's a question of framing, because again, many things that the Gemara, as you said, interest the Gemara very, very deeply. Or you would say superstition, I would say symbolism, maybe even magic. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring. The Shulchan Aruch actually, again, he builds from, like, if I could say, he builds marriage as like various criteria. You have the simcha, and you have the mechila, and you have like the different options, and then you have like the situation, this very small thing in the end. But the Shulchan Aruch says it's not relevant anymore because it's only makom she'en batei din yoshvim. It's like it seems very, very practical here. Like it sums up to something very, very halachically logical, I would say. But then the Rema opens up, I would say, a Pandora box, because when the Rema says nagu, the lashon is v'nagu shelo lisan nashim ela b'tchilat hachodesh be'od she'levana b'meloah, and it's an interesting language. It's not that we have a minhag to do it; it's a minhag not do it. And it's very important because, like, the Rema has a shita, we'll reach there, that we don't do things against luck. It's a prohibition, l'shitat Rema, to go against luck. So if you get married in the beginning of, after the beginning of the month, you're doing a nisur, or at least something not advisable. And suddenly, like, again, we're in this very logical framework of things. Where does this like pop out of? But when we reach the Gemara, and I brought the Gemarot in my source sheet, like the really first sources, we won't actually read them all, but the Gemara in Ketubot Daf Hey, and all, like it actually is a line that runs through all the sugya. There, pardon my English again. But actually, the question of bracha, siman bracha, or bracha ledagim, bracha le'adam, actually plays a very important role. And when we reach the maskana of the Gemara, the end, actually the last three lines of the Gemara here in the source sheet is דתניא מפנימה אמרו אלמנה נישאת בחמישי ונבעלת בשישי, שאם אתה אומר תיבעל בחמישי, למחר משכים לו לאמנותו והולך לו. I will go back just a second for two small words, inami, meaning the main line of the Gemara, even the first thought of the Gemara is how we build the system of the days on how getting married is a question of bracha. It's a question of, as Joel said, superstition. And then you have an inami that's based on a braita, a very important inami. But it's even more interesting to say that like this more magical, symbolic level of the Gemara doesn't have a Tanaic makor. It doesn't have a Tanaic source. But even though it doesn't have a source, the Gemara, at least first in first glimpse, it seems to hold it in a higher esteem than this secondary time that it brings on Shakdu Chachamim al Takanat Bnot Israel, on this din that we heard about on Aaron and Alan Shir, on how we marry an almanah because we want her to have at least a basic simcha. The Gemara speaks a lot about this like level of bracha and how we want to get connected to the brachot on Yimei Bereshit. It seems like this is the basic level from which the Gemara works. I hope I'm understandable. The Gemara brings a different style, and it's okay. It's a very it's valid, and it even has a Tanaic makol. But the Gemara works from this framework, from this more symbolic, more bracha-ish framework. Question?
So tell us again this. But you would say the basis. I'm sorry, the tashtit. The basis would be which Svara? Just do it for me again. I'm sorry.
I would say that like when you read the Gemara, it seems that the basis is bracha. The basis is we're actually working around this, and it's interesting. I would say that like it's even the fact that it doesn't have a Tanaic makol isn't any griuta here. It doesn't work against this baseline because I would say like people tend to say that Judaism isn't a ceremonious religion, but like that's a very big part of religion, being connected to different symbolisms, and like you can say that Nisuim is purely a transaction or a contract, or I don't know, but like the level of bracha and what are we trying to tap into? I don't know, in a more transcendent level.
An agadic framework.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't even say agadic here. And when doing Allen's and Aaron Shear, I would say that like here it's effectively magical in many levels. We want the chasana to have bracha. For example, the Chelkat Mechokek the Shach in Yeridea, he explains around this the whole question of not getting married in Beit HaMetzarim. It's not a question of avelus because we're sad we don't get married. It's simply not a lucky time. You don't want to get married at a time that will give your marriage bad luck. Right. And luck here is viewed as something very practical. You have halacha, and we need to work with halacha's rules, and you also have the rules of luck that they seem to be even more real than the rules of halacha. Halacha is an epistemic system that, like, but luck is something that has actual implications. It's like how the Gemara speaks about ein hora, that you actually can like look at someone's field and it will die. So don't do it. It's very, very real. And but why I said the funny thing here is like how the Rama opens up this box that again the Shulchan Aruch systematically omits. This is in our Siman, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't speak about it. And the interesting thing is when we go to Yeridea, and I would like to open it now. When we go to Yeridea, what the Rama says isn't his diyah against the Shulchan Aruch. It's simply a quote of the Shulchan Aruch himself. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. And it's interesting to think, again, on this question of framing, the Shulchan Aruch actually omits his own halachic opinion about when we should get married to build, let's say, a more logically based laws of marriage. And he omits this thing that, again, he will state somewhere else, but now we want to build a more wholesome and logic ma'arechet here. Was it understood? So let's open the Shulchan Aruch there. It's Yeridei Kufayin Tet. I would like to begin from Siman Aleph. It's 2 Simanim. Who would like to read?
I need another minute to open it.
Where? I'm sorry. Where? Kufayin.
Kufayin Tet Aleph.
I can read.
Kufayin Tet Aleph. Yeah. About Vodazar. About right.
Yeah. אין שואלים בחוזים בכוכבים ולא בגורלות. So you don't get advice from seers or astrologists or people who read coffee cups or whatever. How do you say goralot?
People who cast dice, I think it really means, or tarot card readers. Goral is it's casters. Pastors. Pastors of things. Fortune tellers, that's what you say. Fortune tellers.
The Rama adds, משום שנאמר תמים תהיה עם השם אלוהיך. וכל שכן זה אסור לשאול בקוסמים ומנחשים ובמכשפים.
Continue to the next Siman.
Okay.
To the next Seif. Sorry.
נהגו שאין מתחילים בשני וברביעי ואין נושאים נשים אלא במילוי הלבנה. So the minhag is not to begin anything important on Monday or Wednesday, and not to marry unless the moon is full. Milui levina is the beginning of the month or the middle?
Filling, right?
Well, I thought it meant the middle, but I think it means the beginning of the filling of the month, which means the first half of the month.
Mm-hmm. רמה, ולכן נהגו גם כן להתחיל ללמוד בראש חודש, כי אף על פי שאין ניחוש, יש סימן. במה שאדם יודע שהוא כנגד המזל, לא יעשה ולא יסמוך על הנס, אלא שאין לחקור אחר זה, משום תמים תהיה, כמו שנתבאר.
So, the interesting point here is like again how the Shulchan Aruch opens, because we are in a siman about things you shouldn't do, about how it's problematic to have goralot, but the Shulchan Aruch says, but we do goralot. We do things against the they're like pointed towards goralot. That's the reason why it's brought here. You shouldn't think, like the Shulchan Aruch says. Now, like I imagine the Shulchan Aruch here, like this crazy, the crazy yeshiva boy that goes back home after learning halacha and wants to change the whole way of life of the house. Oh, this is avodah zarah. This is here. This is that. No, also learning l'chashiv, but we have our minhagim. So, and this isn't the Isser, and he doesn't actually give a reason, and that's the interesting point. The Ramah here has an explanatory role every time he brings, because the Ramah brings twice the din of Tamim Tiyeh. They're like,
can I point out something? He says, don't go against the mazel. In other words, he's saying, on the one hand, don't ask. Don't try to find out mazels. But if certain things are known, let's say are well known as being a bad mazel, then pay that respect. In other words, we do believe there's in both dinim, there's clearly a belief in mazelot. One is saying just don't inquire about it, be tamim, and the other is saying, but if you know about it, even though you are tamim because it's well known, don't go against it.
Yeah, I think the tamim in the second seif doesn't work on not doing it. It works more on the level of, even though we do it, don't ask yourself why it works. And that's part of like how many Rishonim understand the Isurim on Mazalot. There's this very big machloket in Machshava between the Rambam and the Ran. Why are we also to do Avodah Zorah? Not Kishufim even. Avodah Zorah itself. The Rambam says it because those gods don't exist. Like, period. It's a hevel. That's the definition. You're not supposed to do something stupid. But the Ran says the problem by doing Avodah Zorah, the Ran in the Drashot and the Chidush in the Shas, he says it lots of times, is that it actually has a sense of work. It does work in many levels, and if we begin doing this Avodah Zorah practices, we might begin to question if Hashem is the supreme God or not. So says what the Ramah basically says is like, we have those more Avodah Zorah-ish minhagim, and we do them and they give us good luck, but don't ask why they work. Don't go much further than that. Don't try to like cross the boundaries of actually going to kfir. And it's a very interesting boundary. Like, we're playing in a very the boundaries here are very, very thin, I would say. And also and going back to the Lashon of the Ramah, he quotes here from the Yerushalmi and from the Lashon Talmudim. Both Talmuds bring this language of Afal Pishen Nachash Yesh Siman. I brought in the source sheet what is Afal Pishen Nachash Yesh Siman? We're Afal Pishen Asur Nachash. Even though we're prohibited on actually doing any actual nichush, things that are siman, they have like a sign. They're more, the Bavli would use the language of chazaka. We know that they are good or bad omens. That's okay to go with this. Maybe the definition of actually doing nachash is like creating a new siman. I want to know if I should do this or that. So I ask.
I'm not sure you're right about that. I think that nachash, as opposed to siman, nachash is where I ask a question. Should I, well, there's different explanations, but it could be, should I do X? If this happens, then I'll do X. And if it doesn't happen, then I won't do X. As opposed to siman, which could just be, I am going to now, eat a, certain food that's going to be a good sign for the year. And I'm not asking any questions. I'm not deciding my behavior. I'm always going to try to have a good year, obviously.
Yeah. So, but that goes back also.
I'm creating a siman that I'm creating that it is going to be a good year by doing an act which makes it a good year.
Yeah, but that's also that's something I had a doubt on if opening, because it's a very wide subject. Like, when I began learning it for the shiur, I found out how big it is. That it's not very clear the boundaries between the different isurim, even on how the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah phrase it. It's not very clear what's we just finished this in the last parasha. לא תאוננו, לא תכשפו ולא תשבעו בשמירת השבת, לא תאכלו על אדם. There are many different isurim that their boundaries, even in the basic midrashay halacha, aren't very clear. But when we learn the Gemara in Shabbat, Perek Zayin, I brought in the source sheet. Pardon that the shiur isn't as orderly. Again, I will say it again. But like when we go back to the Gemara, we see that there's this broader definition of Darkei Aimori, not doing as the Goyim do for good omens or bad omens. And one of the interesting definitions, Rav Nachum, is that Dafka doing things that are like good simanim seem there to be also as well. To not, like for example,
if the goyim do them.
Yeah, no, but like for example, the Gemara says very clearly, for example, not doing melacha on Sunday, not beginning deals on Sunday, is Darkei Aimori, because we're doing something to try to do like affect, huh?
Because the goyim do that. If you see because we're cheating here. I shouldn't talk about this too much because Raphael and I already discussed this a little bit, and I looked into it and I see there's a radak that says that anything that is a siman that the goyim do is what's forbidden, but any siman that they don't do, including ones that you make up yourself, could be permitted. That could be the distinction between that Gemara and Shabbos. That those are things that it's almost like the Gemara is listing the things. These particular nichushim are forbidden, and all other nichushim are permitted.
Yeah, no. So there's this notion also, and it's clear that like if we go to like let's say less rational poskim, that's how they will frame it. They would say you actually don't have an isur here. The issue is being domeh to the goyim. They would even take another step to say that the language of the Gemara and the Tosefta of Darkei Aimori is davka. It's not like only trying to, but like an interesting reference, and it's clear the Rambam doesn't like magic, but like the Rambam says that everything is Darkei, like it's isur me'oinen. He doesn't say is nichush. It's isur inun. That I don't have a translation to it, and I don't think there is a good translation to it. But like isur inun is this. The Rambam says like thinking about a nice day to do something. I see a cloudy day, so I won't do a deal because like the sun doesn't shine on me. Is isur inun? It's mamish the same isur.
Divination. You could translate it you could translate it as divination.
Yeah, but like exactly. But when you go to the Rambam and the Midrash Halacha, it's clear that they didn't understand it in this very narrow sense of.
The Rambam is an Isser Goref. He's completely forbidding everything.
Alan, you had a question?
Yeah, it just seems like there's a distinction worth making here, which is the language of ein lismocha nes, right? Which both Beis Yosef and the Ramah brings up. So yes, it's true in their shita that simanim exist, but Hakadosh Baruch Hu it can still play a trump card, right? There's a clear hierarchy here. It's just that okay, we should not force that to happen. So if you want to make this feel slightly more palatable.
No, of course, but I think, as I said in the beginning, I think the interesting point here is that they're working with something that they think is very, very real. It's like they're like saying, as we would say, you can like abstain from taking a corona vaccination because Hakadosh Baruch Hu is on your side, but like that's lismoch al hanes. You're not actually doing something logical. And I think the interesting thing here is like we're actually like pressing the boundaries of halacha, especially if we go to the Rambam's definition of Isur Inun, to actually go by the mazal, because the mazal is very real in our opinion, and we don't want to mess with it too much. But I brought us here to see the Biur Agra. Sarah, would you like to read? Sorry, I volunteered you.
The Biur Agra on this Siman.
On this Siman. Lachenagu.
Yeah, on okay. Hold on. It's gonna take me a minute to find it. If someone else finds it first, they can read it. On Nagu.
Lachenagu, yeah.
Just that he cites the Zohar. Am I looking in the right place?
מה ש...
Oh, okay. ולכן נהגו וכולי. כמה שכתב מושכים מלאכים על המיון. ומושכים בצינורת לפני החתן והכלה וכולי. Apparently that's from Brachot. יהיה רגיל in אש למיכל בדרישתה וכולי. גרסו על מאיה וכולי. Apparently that's in Harayot and Kritot. So if Parachet the Shabbat, Porsa Chad B'Shava וכולי. Bitlata Maitama וכולי. Okay, I don't know all these contexts, but presumably they're all places where this is like seems to be going on in Shas, and therefore he can say that like, right, he's just kind of dump all of these citations to get you to think that this isn't so foreign because actually we do it all the time. I think is the kind of basic idea. בתולה נישא ביום הרביעי שנאמר ברכה לדגים ואלמנה וכולי שנאמר ברכה לאדם. והרבה כיוצא בזה. Let me give you some more citations.
וזה שמה בשכם. כן. So again, the Gra here actually connects it to the din of בתולה נישא ליום הרביעי ואלמנה ליום החמישי. That we actually have this whole like grid of minhagim or I would say attitudes towards different actions that should bring mazal. For example, the first example, moshchim al ha'ma'ayan, that we bring a king in the day of his coronation to a water spring shetimashech malchutam, omeret Gemara. Like we want a siman that they will have, or the Chatan and the Kala, there's this interesting and very weird image that the Tosefta paints and the Gemara brings to, that people actually would like bring forth tzinorot. They're probably like aqueducts, portable aqueducts of wine and olive oil before Chatan and Kala. So they will also have a meshicha. They're like this continuity of something, of bracha. It's like we throw at them rice today, maybe. I don't know. In places that they still throw rice at Chatanim and Kalot. But like what the Gra here actually builds is like, it's not foreign, as you said, Sarah, it's not foreign. It's something that we all know from different places in the Shas. And it's okay. He doesn't actually explain why it's okay, but he simply like brings up the interesting point that like you can actually say it's not okay. It's like we don't have any Amora saying that it is a problem. And as maybe as Rabbi Nachum said, it's only because they're Kayamori, we have some problems with some different practices. But going back to our Siman in our Seif in Even Ezer, I would like to open the Pitrei Tshuva in Dibur Matchil Eila. If anyone could open.
Back in Even Ezer, yeah?
Yeah, back in Even Ezer, yeah. Who would like to read? Anyone? Alan?
Yes, sorry, just pulling it up, not an Al HaTorah for some reason. So Pichei Tshuva Ella, right? Okay. I am Sefer Pnei Yeshua, B'Kuntra Safra, and Mustafa Kibbutz, Tzipalev, Shatama Ator, B'chol B'Poskim, B'Katu B'Pshitut, B'Hayidna, Isha Niseh B'chol Yom, Bein B'Tulah, Bein Amna, Echad Aleka Mishum Shachtu. ולא היה להם לפרש דלאכילה מיה יש לחוש לטעם דברכה. דהיינו, תנסה בחמישי ותיבל וכו'. Mishum Etzatova, get the mashma, not from Rashi, but Tosfot, Ram, the Mordechai's Vioter, Hagat Ramal, Shevi Shinagu, Slovisa, El Betchilat Chodesh, Fule. I mean, Adif, I assume that the lad needs to have big Mara Klau, Mitama de Bracha, she break the Var Capra, the end, the Vatala, the Yadang. Berich was a Lishav Klad, Visiem, Mikal Makom, Kol Harotza, Nikiim, Ibrei Chachamim, Yeshla, the Chachila. The Tama de Bracha, Benuchalo, Brachot, Al Rosho.
So would you like to explain?
Okay, so
Alan, your microphone is sometimes certain positions hard to pick up. So.
yeah, any better? Good. The Tshuva brings the Pnei Yehoshua raising this question on all of the post game who say a woman can get married any day that they want, since we don't have to worry about Shaktu. But what about being lachush about bracha? It's just generally good. It's good Eitzah, like Rashi and Tosfot and the Ran and everyone else say. And also we need to ask about the Ramah. It says we don't marry and Tchilat HaChodesh. So how is it then fine to get married any day one wants? Why is that symbol of the Chodesh? The Gemara doesn't even mention. Why does that rank more than the reason of bracha that we have and when we have an actual baraita about? And he goes on the Pnei Yehoshua right for a while about this, and it says anyone who wants to you can lechush l'chachila if you want about getting married on particular days because of the reason of having a bracha.
Yeah, so like the reason I brought this Pitchei Tshuva is less for his maskana, that it's a very interesting maskana because he actually doesn't answer his own question till the end. He simply like brings up a very interesting question: why do we even choishish to this new siman after not bringing the simanim that are the simanim from the Gemara? But like he simply says, okay, if you want to be Yirei Shamayim and have many brachot, so do it according to all Shittot. But like the interesting thing I wanted to point out here is that actually this framing of the Shulchan Aruch is actually an achra'ah in many ways. In the level that the Shulchan Aruch explains halacha in a practical level, he basically cancels the tam of bracha in the yamim. You can add a different level of bracha that's not with the Yemei Shavua, not with the days of the week, but in the days of the month. But like how we explain the Din of the Gemara actually changed our perception of this supernatural, level of marriage, of bracha. And like Dafka, what the Pitchei Tshuva says in Maskana is like running from what this Achra actually says. This Achra says that in the moment we say that Chachamim didn't actually worry about this bracha, or bracha ledagim and bracha le'adam, means that this siman isn't a oyoyoy siman, isn't a groisest siman. We have different simanim. The achra'ah of like the achra'ah of the Pitchei Tshuva that's very achroinik, as Rab Daniel Landis would say, like he wants to go out all shitot, have all brachot al rosho, yanuchu kol brachot al rosho, is a very interesting thing. But like we actually can have another interesting point that goes up here. You can actually have different, systems of superstitions that can work many times together, and they can work differently, and they can work even contradictorily. Like you can have a superstition that says that you should do things in Yom Rishon because like that's the day of Briat HaOlam, and there can be an opposite superstition that says you can do things in Yom Rishon Davka because the day is only a first, and you have to have at least 2 days in the week to begin something. Like superstition, this metaphysics of brachot can work in a very very complex way. Alan?
Yeah, I wonder whether there is something inherent in the genre of getting together psak halacha in a code, right? That actually tends to push back against simanim and superstition, even if it doesn't want to, right? The job of the Shulchan Aruch is to give a psak, right? Not to tell us an extended narrative, and so this sort of enchanted world of symbols, it's there in the background, but it doesn't necessarily wind up in the two sentences that he puts on the page, and those two sentences can then be pulled out and used without any of the underlying symbols and superstitions that sort of animate it to begin with.
No, I agree completely. But the interesting thing is that like he actually does bring it in Ilchot in Yor Yodea. I mean, it's not something he omits completely. He could actually not say anything about the issue, but it's something that he holds halachic in some level, at least to actually say it's not against the issur of kishuf and inun. Meaning, it's a para halachic thing, and again, it goes back to the thing that they hold it to be something very serious, as the Ramah said, "Lo lismoch al hanes." And this Ramah's lashon is a tzitut of the Bet Yosef. It's a quotation from the Bet Yosef himself that you actually like going against the Mazal is lismoch al hanes, is doing something against logic. You're not doing something logic. And only to finish with another, like basically the interesting thing that you can go out from this sugya is then you can come to an end of saying that we hold simanim in a very high regard, or we don't hold them at all, and we even think them to be maybe prohibited in many levels of maybe kishuf, maybe inun, maybe tamim tiyeh. But there's an interesting shita that goes back even to the Talmud himself, the Talmud itself, and the Meir picks it up, and I would like only to like enlighten it, because I think that this middle shita can actually like bring a lot of relevancy today, specifically on how we build things, how we build religious symbols, and how we tackle with this question of a reality, magic, or and how it conflicts with halacha. So the Gemara in Shabbat, I brought in the Mekurot, is Gemara Shabbat daf. Just a second. It's
But some Zayin.
Tzamech Zayin. Yeah, I'm simply my computer is very doing problems. Sorry. But like, can you read it?
Yeah, I'm just posting. Here it is in the chat for people who. Yeah.
Tzamech Zayin. Yeah, Chava.
You want me to read?
Chava.
Yeah. כל דבר שיש בו משום רפואה, אין בו משום דרכי המון. האין בו משום רפואה, יש בו משום דרכי המון. בתניא, אילן שמשאיר פירותיו, סוקרו וצובע אותו בסיקרא, וטוענו באבנים. ויש לומר טוענו באבנים, כי היכד דיחחוש אפילו. אלא סוקרו בסיקרא, הרפואה כאבד. כי היכד דליכליה אינשי בליב עלי רחמי.
So what does the Gemara says? Basically, they're like the Gemara deals with this question of simanim. It's like brought forward from the Mishnah and from the Tosefta, the whole questions of the Kemuri as we like briefly opened it today. But like the Gemara goes back to like the basic question: what does actually constitute a dal Kemuri? What constitutes a kishuf? So the Gemara says basically something that isn't logic, that doesn't have a logical reason. It's only something like that can be that isn't like impliable in the very simple level. It's not a refu. It doesn't mo'il. But like, so what the Gemara actually comes to ask is like the question of the tree there, the minhag that they have, this weird minhag that they have with trees, is very like, again, it almost crosses the boundary of doing something illogical, something superstitious, doing something that like, again, works with this world of magic,
painting it in red. It's like I don't know, an ominous color to bring blessing from the gods. I don't know. So what's the teirut of the Gemara? So the Gemara brings it to a more to a different level. It's not symbolic or asymbolic. It doesn't. The paradigm isn't either it is a omen or it isn't an omen. It can be something in the middle. It can be a siman letfila. It can be something that I would see and my heart would open up to prayer. And this is the shita of the Meiri Norayot. The Meiri actually says that all the simanim that we see in the Gemara are actually like an open up for prayer. We eat, so according to Meiri, we eat the simanim in Rosh Hashanah more in order to pray than in order to actually eat the simanim. We're actually doing something prayerful, I would say. Like even we're doing it to symbolize something that we want, not to actually, it's not theurgy, if we would use philosophical terms. We're not actually trying to impose something in a metaphysical level. We're doing something that has a symbolical meaning for what we want, not actually trying to achieve it through it. It's to impact us rather to impact God. Thank you, Yavni. It's a very good definition. We're trying to impact ourselves. The Meiri actually brings what will bring me a good year is actually I'm eating this apple and I want to have a good year, and I understand to have a good year I need to do tshuva. So by eating it and by asking for it, it's like I'm actually becoming a better person in this moment, because like I understand that I can't continue being in a different way if I want to have a good year. But like it's what I went through, I hope like the Ma'alach was more or less understandable. Again, sorry, my English and had it was difficult and and so on. But like the interesting thing that I wanted to bring up, and I think it's like it has a lot to do with the siman that we learned now and to different halachical questions, is like how do we define the boundaries between superstition and the good, I don't know, Yiddishkeitish beliefs and prayerful deeds. There's a very interesting wiggle room here to work with, and like I can say every Jewish family has its own superstitions and traditions, and how much we give them place inside halacha and inside our ceremonies that we build as and different things. It's a very interesting, like they can have a very important role, and they can also have a pejorative role, and they can enhance our religious experience, and they can be even also halachically. And again, thank you.
You're talking about in many ways control. How do we control these desires that we have, certain practices that persist? And the one, when do we go to war and smash them? And when do we kind of change it, make it inspiration? I'm just trying to repeat what your inspiration for prayer. We make it something that actually there's a mucker for it. We don't understand it, but there's a muck. In other words, we normalize it, we calm it down, we disassociate it from Avodah Zarah. And at weddings in which everything seems so important, and in which we're worried about so many things. And in weddings, people find things to worry about. Therefore, superstitious practices are actually a little calming and therapeutic. You didn't wear your Bubba's. Oh, you got to wear the Bubba's, stocking, or you have to have the Zeta's girdle. Those also stupid. Yeah,
I can say that.
They're superstitious, but they're basically okay. Make people feel better.
I can say that it also has a complex. Also, like it has not so nice sides. For example, like before I was born, but like my uncle and my aunt, like a day before their wedding, they found out that my aunt's Hebrew name is the same Hebrew name of my grandmother. They became a shigoen. They can't actually get married because they're a chassid, and they had to change her name. It was like
make a bit And then
Exactly,
it
the whole
works.
Michigas.
And then
and
it
like-
works. Nothing terrible happened. Then it worked.
No, but it brought a lot of, like, I don't know, of anxiety, of like this whole
Right.
question of bracha. Will the Nisuin have bracha? Will they have Siman bracha? You don't want to mess with Mazal.
The other thing that you said, which I think is important, of course, is that bracha is a zach. I mean, it's a thing. It's an entity. You want more of that bracha. You want to, just like that other, what's the term, juju or whatever? Forgot which way. Juju works positively, but yeah. So you want the positive juju. You don't want the negative juju. All right. So we got some of that stuff. At least all you Hasidim have it. I don't have any of it, but you know, you can do with it what you want if it makes you feel better, but not too much.
Okay, Yishar Koyach. Very
Thanks,
nice,
everybody.
very nice, Raphael. Well, we didn't actually finish the Siman, but I guess, I'm sorry, Josh, you're probably waiting to start, but I think we'll do it next week. We'll have to do it next week. You'll be able to come, next week?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So Josh, Yavni, and Andre are next week. If somehow they finish early, then we'll go on to the next Siman, but I doubt it. Because once you're learning those sugyas, once you learn a Siman in depth, you have a lot to, I'm sure you'll have a lot to say about it. After that, we'll do Siman Samach Hey, where Lexi will do the first two Seifim, and Joel will do the second two Seifim. So that's just to keep in your back of your mind, everybody. All right, so thank you, Shakar, to everybody who participated. It was great.